Welcome, everyone. I now call the January 7th, 2025 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we'll take a moment to take a roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Thank you. Councilmember Zorn?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Alders?
Here.
Councilmember Kurd?
Here.
Councilmember Menke?
Here.
Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Before we continue with the rest of the agenda, I'd like to reiterate some guidelines. For remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently, and mute your microphone when not speaking. First up is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to the meeting agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public engagement opportunities. We have a renter focus group. You can share input at our next focus group meeting as we continue to study potential tenant protections. On January 15th, 2025, still weird to say that, 5:30 p.m. at City Hall. We also have the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. You can join our volunteer event with Whale Scout to restore habitat at the former Wayne Golf Course on January 20th, 2025 from 1 to 4 p.m. at the former Wayne Golf Course. We have the Advisory Body Open House. You can informally chat with current volunteers, staff, and council members to learn more about boards and commissions. That's going to be January 21st, 2025 from 5 to 6 p.m. at City Hall in room 107-108 over there. Next up is public comment. The city has accepted public comment in writing as well as accepted sign up for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. We had no sign-ups today. However, if anybody's in the audience and wishes to speak, please step to the podium and state your name. You'll have 3 minutes. If you are in the virtual audience and wish to speak, please use the raise hand function and we'll panel you in for 3 minutes. Give people a moment for that. I have none.
New year, new us. Moving on to the reports, the city manager report. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. And yes, welcome to the first meeting of our new year. Just a couple of things to update. First of all, I did want to continue on from an update that we had at the end of the year about the 102nd Avenue Bridge. At that update, we discussed how we were soon to be under contract for work, and over the holidays, we did reach an agreed upon contract. I'm pleased to also then say that this Thursday is a day of significance of where there will be a meeting with the city and the contractor to go over the details. And then starting on Sunday in the evening will be the first closure. So at 9 p.m. through midnight, there will be a closure of 522 as we begin work. So the good news is that we're now underway. The city website has been updated, as has social media. And then just for those who are following along, anytime you do a construction project, you always learn along the way. I think we can think about people who have done home renovations and you take away the first layer and you find out something new. So what we're planning on doing is on Thursdays of every week, we're going to be updating the schedule of what's to come, and we'll keep getting the messaging out there. But again, the good news is we've reached that start date, as the emergency manager reminded me. That's around a little under 2 months from it happening to having a design and resources. So we're very pleased about that and hope to be moving across the bridge soon. The second thing, just on a little bit of a lighter note, just want to acknowledge, I often end the year with this acknowledgement, but saved it for the beginning of 2025. Just a thank you to our city clerk team. And I'm pleased that our former deputy clerk happens to be in the room tonight too, to be part of this. But last year, there was, if you were wondering, what did I read last year? You read 209 agenda bills. So that's how many action items that you took. And that is right around par of the previous year, but certainly an increase over the years before that. So it's been Again, a lot of work that goes into from our departments, preparing materials, but every single item gets touched on by our city clerk team. So wanted to say thank you to them.
Thank you.
Where's the key?
Could we get them like a special hat? Like, is there a way we could make this more awkward, but also show appreciation? Thank you.
We do also then have, that was a good reminder. Speaking of segue to the city clerk, we have one more formal update as well, a staff report. And as you mentioned about the open house, Mayor, and the community events coming up, we do have an open house, but wanted to spend a few minutes today reviewing the board and commission recruitment schedule for this year. It always seems to be something that comes up that you don't see happening. So we want to make sure you know what steps to expect, and I think there's a question or two along the way too. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Laura Hathaway, our city clerk.
Thank you. Yeah, we met in September, and several of you were there when we had the mixer, and we kind of laid out the recruitment schedule for 2025. And so tonight, we're just going to review that a little bit. It has changed in light of is it the NLC conference in March? So we had to change the joint meetings that we're going to have with our board and commissions. But the schedule is the recruitment will open on January 13th through February 21st. We will have the open house on January 21st. Anybody who has applied in the week prior to the open house will be invited to that, and we will have it advertised on our website. And then we have the tentative joint meetings with the forward-facing boards and commissions scheduled for February, March, and now April 1st, because we shifted that for the NLC conference. Interviews are currently scheduled for March 25th, with appointments on April 8th, and terms begin May 1. So our recruitment efforts are going to focus, we'll obviously have the application on the website along with the open house. We're going to use social media channels, send out to all subscribers and diverse demographic groups. I'm working with Gabby on that, our DEI coordinator, so that we try to have as broad outreach as we can to the whole city. And she'll be focusing on that. And then the tentative joint meetings, and we have established these with the board and commission liaisons, is February 18th, we'll have a joint meeting as a study session with the Planning Commission. March 4th will be the Parks and Rec Board. March 18th will be the Arts Commission, and April 1 will be the Landmark Preservation Board. And yes, I realize that the recruitment has, for anybody who's applied to serve on any one of those boards, we will invite to attend those, just so they can get a taste of what it's going to be like, hear the work plans, that kind of thing. And then obviously if they're appointed, they can hit the ground kind of running. And that's our hope anyways for this, this go around. Having said that, that's the end of my PowerPoint, but I do have a couple of questions. And one is, last year we had a pretty big number of applicants. We don't know what we're going to have this year. But we do have 16 openings for across the board and commission. We're also going to have a booth at the open house for the DEI Advisory Committee or Commission, I don't know what it's called. And that's not a council appointed one, but we will have a booth there, and there's going to be 7 openings on that as well, but those will be appointed by the city manager. So we're trying to expand our volunteer opportunities for the public. As far as the appointment interview schedule goes, one of the questions we have, which we did last year, we had a subcommittee of council members that, reviewed all the applications and then brought back their recommendation on who to interview. And we were wondering if council would be interested in that again. It may be something that you want to wait until we find out how many applications we have, at the end of February, but just something that I was hoping we could discuss and kind of hear where you're at this year about doing the same thing.
Is this something you'd like feedback on right now?
Sure, if you And again, if you want to wait until, I mean, if after this discussion, then we come back and we only have, you know, I don't know, 15 applications for 16 openings, then that may be a moot point. But if we have a lot like we did last year, then might be something to think about. But yeah, I'd love some feedback.
Councilmember Zorns?
Yeah, don't go looking for extra work if we don't need to look for extra work. It's prudent to wait. I just want to say that we encourage people to participate, and it feels like we're dishonoring them if we don't allow them to interview, go through the process of presenting orally besides written. So I understand that some cities do it a little differently, where everybody gets a chance, everybody who's applied gets a chance to speak. So I would love to have that conversation if it becomes, you know, we need to break the workload up. But that's where I land on that.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thanks. I found the subcommittee really helpful last year. It would have taken a lot of everybody's time to wait for, what did we guess, like either 7 hours for everybody to get 5 minutes, or for like across multiple nights. And we've seen before when we do just a ton of interviews that people really struggle to be available for those 5 minutes. We have people with small children and all kinds of stuff going on. So I think that'd be good. But I do think, I think what Councilmember Zorns referenced, I think of that especially with regard to sort of younger people, like our youth positions. So maybe we interview all the youth applicants, and then with adults who are used to more of a job interview process, you know, we go through the applications and do a subcommittee. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
We're going to wait and give everybody a chance and circle back. Councilmember Alders?
Yeah, I'd very much like to know, you know, what are the numbers of people who've applied before we make some of these decisions. Last year, having the subcommittee was really useful, and I'm glad that we did it that way. But until we know sort of like what the workload is, it seems too soon to comment on that.
Councilmember Curd?
I agree. It's a little too soon to make any judgment calls on whether we go through an extended process or not, but I do also think that it respects people's time when we don't have a 6-hour meeting. And so I think I could say right now that if the meeting would be longer than, 3 hours of interviews at 5 minutes each with the in and out time and everything, all the logistics, then it's not worth it to do. We need to split it up into a preliminary process and then a final process like we did last year.
All right, Councilmember Zorns?
Thanks. I'm kind of putting our city manager on the spot. If we do have a large number of people, there are some other ways that we can approach this where everybody gets to interview. They actually have more time, but council doesn't spend 5-6 hours. The project is divided up among the council members in interviewing the different boards and commissions. So if it ends up looking like a huge number, coming up with some creative ways that other cities are doing this and put that as a discussion for council would be helpful, but don't start doing that homework just yet.
I think what we can do then is be prepared with some options of, depending on how many people there are. And again, I think there's that, what I'm hearing is a balance of valuing people who are interested's time and whether or not, how much it goes into it, but making sure that they have a chance to speak. So we'll put our heads together and think of some options and bring them forward and see what works best for council.
The one thing that I would say is I wasn't part of the subcommittee last time, but from what I understand, we had a decent amount of applicants where the application was, I'll just say, not a lot of time and care was taken on the application, and it was very obvious. And like for people who really truly answer the questions and like seem like they really want to do this, like I totally agree with Councilmember Zorns. Like I think it's good to honor that. but that wasn't the case with all the applications we got last year. So I would say let's just kind of look at application quality too. You know, if there's 15 total words on the application, like, and we don't interview them, that doesn't bother me very much. So let's see what we get and take it from there. But I don't think any of us want to spend 7 hours in a meeting interviewing people for 5 minutes each.
Got it. Thank you. That's all I have tonight. Is there any other questions that I can answer regarding the recruitment or commissions in general? Anything?
Oh, actually, I'll talk about this in the next thing. Councilmember Dodd?
For people who have emailed in public comment between like the last recruitment period and now, could we also add them to a notification list? To me, that's a sign that they're email, or if we just have their email, even if they spoke verbally, but just a way to reach people who are clearly hand raising to be involved.
For a board and commission?
Yeah. I mean, if someone lives here and says, I have feelings about X, here are my feelings in an email, we could send them a notification that, hey, boards and commissions are open. Like, this is a way to advise the city council on a topic.
Yeah, we could go back and do that.
I don't know what that looks like effort-wise, but
Well, we'd have to go back and see what we got for public comment and then email all those people versus,
well, I didn't know if you could just, like, if it's going to be a new, something that goes out where we can like add a list of people. I work in email marketing for a living, so I don't know what we use to send the email, but since this is also my idea, if it's appropriate, I can try to pull the emails from old agendas too. Like, it's, yeah.
We do, the city has an email sign-up list of where anybody who's interested in getting any sort of notification from the city can be on there. And I think that's the scope of where we would do that. I think there is, this balance between of if somebody commented on a single issue versus has said, I want to be notified anytime there's a meeting or update on the website. I'm looking over towards our assistant city manager, but I know we have something like 40 different categories. So I think there's a difference between I emailed the city council once and I've opted into getting updates from the city. So I would just caution on that of we can look at what the level of effort is to go back and pull every email that went to the council over a period of time, but it's a little bit undefined as well. And my concern is that, I mean, we could do our level best. We may miss somebody.
Do we know if the amount of people subscribed goes up after we get a significant amount of public comment? Is there a correlation there?
I think Assistant City Manager Becky Range is coming to speak to this a little bit.
thank you.
Because we get a number of people who say, well, I had no idea. And while there are mechanisms to have an idea, are people taking advantage of them? That's kind of, I don't know.
We do sometimes have an increase in subscribers when there's an interesting or slightly controversial topic, but I do think we also need to respect the residents' wishes. We actually, as a best practice, can't opt someone into the current listserv without their permission, but I do think what we could do is in the messaging that's surrounding the board and commission vacancy publicity, we can really say if you've been involved or if you visited a city council meeting and perhaps you have input you'd like to share or you'd like to shape decisions, now is your time to get involved. And we can, I think, reach some of those community members that you're speaking of potentially, but we'll go back and take a look at it for sure.
No, I appreciate it. And I don't often try to throw out something I pulled out of the microwave too early, but I was just trying to think of a way to get some people who clearly are very passionate about things, but maybe just haven't found the way that they can stay informed. So
We really appreciate it.
Can I kind of riff off of that concept, that idea that you shared, Becky, around in the invitation to apply to boards and commissions, can we also add a section, like a little blurb saying, here's how to stay up to date with city, like, the newsletter, like opt-in? Could we link people to that so that maybe they get the email, but they don't want to apply, but they do want to be informed of things going forward? Could you connect them to the page where they can sign up for those things?
The subscription list.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a summary. The most simple list to subscribe to is the e-news list. So I think you're absolutely right about that. We could probably push that out in a couple of different ways and encourage folks to sign up.
Yeah, I think that would be great. That's one of the things that, as I've sent out my newsletter to folks, that every once in a while people are like, oh, how come I didn't hear about this? Or how can I find out? And so I will send them to the e-news sign up page. And, because I think city manager said there's like 40 different listservs you can sign up for in the city. And so I'll just send them to that page and people can kind of click and choose what they want to get updates on. So I do try to get it out how I can. And I think that, periodically it's helpful to just remind people, especially as people move in or people get, involved and connected to things, to just say, here's some basic, please stay involved this way. Here's some information that you can access.
And just a quick reminder, because I know you probably don't remember this, but in the engagement strategy that all of you approved this year, we have a project in our work plan to actually update that email strategy because it is a little bit dated. And so we do have a project in our work plan to modernize that email listserv and that process to make it a little bit easier for the public. So you'll see that coming this year.
I love to hear that. Yeah, it could use it. You're right.
It's time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I think we can move on to council committee reports, community reports, and conversations. Thank you. Councilmember Curd.
Thanks. This happened at the end of last year, but we were pretty busy. So now that we have some breathing room, wanted to mention that in November, I was elected to be the vice chair of RIA 8, our salmon recovery regional council here that Bothell is part of in our watershed. I'm really excited. It intersects with a lot of my interests and my professional life, and so I'm hoping to bring some cool ideas as well as represent the city of Bothell and our really cool projects that we have going on, especially at Waynita, and the encouraging things that we have with fish passage barrier removal that's happening in the city as well. One of the things that I wanted to bring up now is that community groups that are looking to do salmon recovery projects or habitat projects that are in need of money can apply for grant funding through RIA 8. There are 2 grant rounds that are open right now, and they'll be dispersing more than $4 million, depending on some legislative allocations. If those groups need assistance plugging into RIA 8 or getting money, reach out to me. The deadline for it's not an application yet. It's just a notice of intent, kind of a survey to see what kind of project are you proposing, what's the status and what's the need of funding. That sort of survey is due on the 17th or the 15th, of January. And so there's an online portal to go through, and I'm more than willing to show and share that with the community if there are groups out there. So exciting news, and stay tuned.
That's really cool that you're the chair of that now. Vice chair. Okay. We'll give it a year or two. Councilmember Aldrich.
I wanted to ask Councilmember Curd, can you send me the grant information?
Yes.
And I'll try to get that in my newsletter.
That'd be great.
Cool, thank you. I do have an update from, this is sort of a joint NUSA / North King County Coalition on Homelessness update. And one great thing that we can announce is that Lake City Partners for Ending Homelessness, they were able to open the shelter in Kenmore for senior women. And as of last notice that I saw, there are currently 6 women who have been able to move in into their little cubicles. They're set up to be kind of semi-private spaces, and they are now, sheltered and in a warm building instead of in their cars or on the streets. And that's been really exciting, with really great support from King County, some creative, strategic shuffling of materials so that they could be used and reused at the shelter. at our last NUSA partners meeting, I also gave a presentation to all the partners about National League of Cities and the Human Development Priorities work that I did with the Human Development Committee last year. And this has already passed since we haven't had a meeting since then. But on the 2nd of January, so last week, the Behavioral Health Committee for NUSA held a town hall with Representative Lauren Davis and representatives from the Center for Human Services to talk about opioid response. That is available on a recording on the NUSA website. So if there's anybody who would like to get up to date on North King County efforts to address the opioid crisis, that is a resource available to the community. Also coming up is the NUSA Awards on January 22nd, later this month, where many of our human services agencies that we are partnering with at the city and throughout our region have been nominated for those awards. And so it's really great to show up in support of the work that they're doing. So that's my update. Thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thanks. Thanks for those updates, Councilmember Alders. I was going to add, I think sometimes people think that volunteering with organizations like Lake City Partners means one-on-one interaction, preparing meals, but it was actually a lot of volunteers who prepared the senior women's shelter. There was painting, there was reassembling the cubicles on site. So I really want to thank those volunteers who stepped up. It was over, I think, a couple of long weekends, and it was really great. And feel free to connect with either myself or Councilmember Alders if you want connections on doing that kind of volunteer work. It was really cool to see.
Agreed. I was able to go with my youngest child and do some cleanup and preparation. That was before the cubicles had been delivered. And so the most recent photo I saw was the cubicles all assembled. And every little cubicle looks like a little bedroom space. It's actually pretty nice for the fact that it's an old sheriff station.
All right, I'm going to ask a question that is kind of related to the last one, but this seemed like a better place to put it in. Right now in our code, we are restricted from calling a council salary commission to every other year. And every other employee at the city does not have that restriction. And I am wondering if there is any desire on the council to lift that restriction.
Can you repeat what's the issue?
So the code right now says we can only call a salary commission on even years, on every other year. And I am wondering if there is any desire to lift that restriction and allow a salary commission to be called on odd years as well, if the mayor chooses to do it.
What problem would that solve? What's the issue? Why are you asking the question?
Every other employee at the city gets a raise every year,
Oh, I get it. Okay.
and we don't.
I would support it as an option because it sounds like it's up to the mayor's discretion to call it. And so that would give you or your predecessor or successors. There we go.
Yeah.
There you go. The future ones. The opportunity to do that, especially if we encounter, I don't know, a very large inflation year or something again. I hope not.
I hope not.
And honestly, I think our council would be like, let's not take a raise on an inflation year. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'm not speaking for future councils, but I think that as a discretion, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Councilmember Dodd?
I'm not against it, but I'm not for it. And that's not really worth saying, except I would rather that we maybe look at things like salary is one piece. I think we're lucky on this council in that most of us are fully employed and not relying on a council stipend to pay our bills, because you literally couldn't and live within city limits. I don't know that the salary commission is the solution to things like childcare during meetings, health insurance, other things that could help more people do this work. So I would almost want to look at a more holistic sense of what could be useful for that. I realize that's not your question. I don't know. I'm not sure. Because what I don't want is the future council to have this salary frozen in time. Like I think of, I don't know if I should, a neighboring city that rhymes with Udenville that had like the same salary for like 15 years and it didn't even pay for childcare for the meetings they were going to, for example. We weren't that bad in my time on council, which is very short. So I wouldn't want that to happen to someone in the future, but I also don't want the resources that go into something to be called too often for, I want to find the balance.
Can I just interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
All of those things you mentioned are under the purview of the Salary Commission.
Okay.
So any sort of childcare or transportation allowance or just like.
Not allowance, just
Yeah.
council or public shows up, there's a certified person who can watch your kid while you do your business.
That is a different thing.
Yeah. So that's kind of the thing. But and not everyone wants that kind of childcare either, but I'm just saying like, you know, there's a wider thing that I would like to look at. But yeah, I appreciate that we've like, I think this year a low income stipend was passed, if I recall correctly.
No,
that was Kirkland.
That was Kirkland.
Yeah. Very cool, Kirkland. But I just, a more holistic thing would be interesting to look at. Because I think of people who can't get into this work because of the flexibility of their living wage job isn't there, or for whatever the reason, and I wonder how we can lower the barrier.
Almost all of those things, except for like if we did childcare at council meetings that anybody could use, almost everything you just mentioned is under the purview of a salary commission. And those are the kind of instructions that we could give a salary commission when they kicked off. Like, hey, here's the things that, you know, we're interested in looking at.
Okay, you got me. I'm interested in talking about it.
Okay. Councilmember Zorns?
Yeah, let's have a conversation about it. I'm sitting here thinking, you know, potentially it could be a discussion for something that would be happening every year, might be asking a lot of the community's time and our staff's time, but could every 2 years a discussion be inserted on what's COLA for staff, and for year two, when year two on council, put a COLA in. Anyway, let's have that discussion.
That would be another thing that a salary commission could look at. They could look at that cost of living and they could say, hey, like, you know, we're going to raise it, you know, X% per year or inflation or something like that. That's another thing that a salary commission could do. It's something that we could do too. It just wouldn't be in place until after the next elections. And I do prefer having a salary commission do it. So we're not giving ourselves raises. Councilmember Mankey?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I might be the lone one out on my limb here, but I also think I'm the only one who served on the Salary Commission prior to being on council. Part of the Salary Commission's job, as was noted, is to consider all the factors that go into compensation for a council member. They do consider COLA, they do consider medical benefits, retirement, pretty much anything you can think of. And there are a lot of comparables. I know this recent cycle, we moved it to coincide with the budget so that's more predictable and we're not having compensation increases during off-cycle years from the budget. So I think that was a positive step. But every year, I'm not so sure I support that because they have the opportunity to do COLA. If they wanted to do that, they could easily do it, save a lot of staff time, save a lot of committee time doing that because they do a comp study. There are multiple staff members involved in this study. There's multiple meetings, there's public hearings. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just, you know, 1 meeting, 2 meetings, we're done. So I think these things can be done on every other year schedule. I think it works pretty well. So at this time, I would not be in support of it because there's other ways to accomplish what we're looking, or what may be being looked at to be accomplished there. So I know this year we also received a pretty hefty increase in salary, much more larger than the last few cycles. So I think right now we are compensated at the level of other cities our size, our scope, pretty comparable in terms of like ability to contribute to a retirement account, things like that. I do understand there are other things that they may want to consider, and I know there are other cities nearby that we watched some things go off the rails this last year as well when they were going down that path. So I want to be hesitant and careful in this area. We are volunteers to an extent, we are running, this is not a full-time position, and you have to be a much, much, much larger city for it to be. So I think it's fair to be compensating people for their time and their efforts, and if you have to have childcare, those types of things are important. We want to enable people to be able to serve if they have a desire to serve, but I also want to be careful that we're not over-indexing on the other side, and I think there are ways to accomplish what is being discussed up here in terms of wanting a review and wanting things to keep pace and things like that. So conversation would be interesting, but I wouldn't be supporting it at this time.
Councilmember Curd.
Yeah, interesting discussion up here. I think I would want to look into it more. I need to see what are the sort of risks. Yeah, we have seen regionally the possibility of salary commission guidance being maybe not in line with kind of fiscal policy. So I want to make sure that we have some measure of protection, recognizing that when we call a salary commission, it's not really into our hands anymore. And that's part of the benefit, is that we live with the consequences of that. So I think I would support looking at it. But I also want to take some more time to think about how we call the salary commission, what are the kind of checks and balances on it, what are the parameters that we set around its use of resources and staff time, and what are we setting ourselves up for if we call one every year and the compensation for this position changes so drastically and dramatically every year that doesn't provide folks who do need some degree of certainty for their service time being offset with compensation. So I want to look at it a little bit more, but for your intents and purposes, sure, I would support.
So just to summarize, I heard the general sentiment that I heard was to tee this up for further conversation. So we'll get something scheduled for an upcoming agenda item and frame just a refresher of what the state law provides for salary review, both if the council does it or if there's a committee or a commission formed, and we'll bring that back. I do just one quick thing. There was a statement or a question about this last year, and I do just want to note that the commission did offer a low income supplement in the amount of $400 per month for anyone who was on council or elected to council whose income falls below 80% of the median income. So that was one thing that they did add. So you were remembering correctly.
You were right. I was not. Perfect. All right. In that case, we're going to move to projected agenda discussion. Anybody?
Wasn't this projected agenda discussion?
Sure, but I didn't actually go there yet. So, I mean,
It was sort of a council conversation.
Conversations. Yeah. Councilmember Dodd.
Well, since you brought it up, and then I brought it up, could we explore if there is room, physically and budgetarily, that's not a word, for childcare to be provided during council meetings?
I would want to look at, there's a lot of factors to that I want to look at. If that's something council wants us to spend staff time on researching, we can certainly do that.
That's totally fair. And I understand that this building was perhaps not designed with that in mind. You guys got me with the really good Imagine Children's Museum care at the comp plan open houses, but I realized that might not be an every Tuesday sort of a deal.
Yeah, I do remember during the council retreat 2 years ago, during the priorities discussion, that was a potential priority that came up. It didn't make the list. If that's something that you want to revisit again, we can look at that. I'd want to know a little bit more, maybe from our practice on future items. Maybe that's something that you and I could discuss in a check-in frame it out a little bit and then bring a proposal for council to consider of what the timing, the scope would look like.
That's totally great. And I think our vision that we came up with would rank higher than that for me. Obviously, that's why we ended up with the final work plan we did. It's something that I think of, especially I feel a lot of empathy when we do have someone giving public comment and there's a kid sort of slowly pulling them closer to the earth as they're talking. I've been there. But yeah, I'd love to explore it. And if it's not feasible, it's not feasible, but I'd love to try.
Understood. Now, let's talk.
All right, in that case, I would love to accept a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Dodd?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Aldrich to approve the consent agenda. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Perfect, thank you. I got to get to the right page. First up is ordinances and resolutions, is interim ordinance local project review in response to Senate Bill 5290. It's Agenda Bill 25009. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, this is a topic that bridges from our end of the year and into the first meeting of the year. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to our Deputy Director of Community Development, Christian Getz, to walk you through the legislation before you. Christian, go ahead.
Thank you, City Manager, and Happy New Year and good evening, everybody. It's good to be back. Glad to be here. See if I can remember how to. There we go. Share the whole screen. You'll likely remember at the very end of a very long evening back in December, we talked about this Senate bill that passed back in 2023. What we're looking for is action tonight to adopt an interim ordinance. What we've got here is a 2023 initiative that most of the aspects went into effect back in 2023, but there was one piece that we actually needed to do some update work on that went into effect on January 1 of this year. It's a requirement that creates some streamlining and accountability within local project review. And we found a few minor updates within the code that needed to be considered. So the bill, it establishes deadlines for project reviews by type. There's a timeline and standard update for both the applicant and jurisdictions. And it created just general accountability that we don't see any problems with how we interact. But what it did was it created a couple of updates that we need in these 4 discrete sections of the code where we referenced a specific amount of time. That timeline has changed, so we have updated that, for example, to just reflect the RCW, so it's set for the future. And yeah, that is about it. It really was a minor thing for us to update because we don't typically reference that many immediate items, immediate timelines within our code. And so we'll look to follow those with whether we had this enacted for the first 7 days of the year. And so what we're looking for tonight is adoption of this, and within 60 days we'll be back to hold a public hearing, and then within 6 months we will look to approve a final ordinance. So with that, if there aren't any questions, I will turn it back to you for action on this. So pretty short and sweet here.
Councilmember Aldrich.
I would like to ask a question. Recently, I've heard from a few community members around the difference between being like a builder or a developer and permitting because that's their business and that's what they do, and just being a homeowner that wants to make updates or add a unit to their home through like an ADU process. Do these changes, and did the state law reflect ADUs as a type of development or a type of permit project?
They didn't specifically. It did break down a targeted review requirement based on kind of the scale of a project. So an accessory dwelling unit permit would be the same as a new single family, would be the same, a 65-day total in-house review target for that. Same as a sign permit, same as a right-of-way permit. What we categorize as type 1 permits in our code. A type 2 would be a public notice permit, which is like a short plat or maybe a reasonable use permit that has a 100-day target review. And then anything that requires a public hearing would have a 170-day in-house review time. So that's not apply date to issue date. There's some ins and outs as the project moves forward. But no, nothing specific about accessory dwelling units. But they are the simplest and most straightforward permit that, in that group of permits that we manage within the development services groups.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful overview. I guess the one sort of thought I would have is around the different types of ADUs, right? There's the difference between like converting your basement into a livable separate unit or building 4 new walls in your backyard, right? And one of them is more like a home renovation, and the other one is more like building a unit, right? Like building a new structure. And I realize that the state law does not distinguish between the two. Does our community development office have the ability to distinguish between the two?
We do have the ability, and we do triage or we set target reviews based on the complexity of a project. So a new single family has a greater complexity. A new home with foundation utilities that you're digging in has a lot greater review timeline that's needed, as opposed to an addition, interior alteration, or if you're just going to convert the interior portion of your home to an accessory dwelling unit. There may be plumbing and mechanical, still some work to do, but the complexity of that review is less, and so the timelines typically for target reviews would be shorter. So I don't know those off the top of my head, but we can look at kind of how we prioritize those. I know we do prioritize those. So even though a sign permit and a new single family home are both type 1 permits, we don't take the same amount of time to do both of those. A few weeks for a sign permit versus several weeks for a new home.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding you correctly, the time frame is the limit of how long you have to do it within, but sometimes things happen faster. Correct. Because it's less complicated,
right, and
easier to do. Okay, and I think that's useful. If you wanted to follow up with me by like looking into what like your current policies are around the easier projects with the shorter timelines, I'd be open to hearing sort of how we do that.
Okay.
Because I think there are members of our community who would like to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool. Thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks. I'll just say that at the end of last year, I had the opportunity to go to a business in Canyon Park who was looking to make some tenant improvements, and they were, I don't know why they wanted to meet with me because I can't do anything about that, but I was interested and I wanted to just tour around and see what brought them to Bothell, and they have another office in California, and they were petrified that the project would take so long and lose them so much X amount of dollars. And, to my untrained eye, it looked like it was a pretty simple, like small tenant improvement project, but they came to Bothell with their fear of permitting, and I'm hopeful that action like this is able to give, businesses as well as folks who are looking to build on their house opportunities to be more confident in some of the complexities of this process. So I'm going to move that we adopt the interim ordinance as proposed, amending various sections of chapters 11, 4, 6, 10, and 12 of the Bothell Municipal Code.
I'm happy to second that.
I have a motion from Councilmember Curd and a second from Councilmember Alders to move the recommended action. Would anybody like to speak to said motion? Seeing none, City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kerr?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you, City Clerk. Do we want to take a break before we do the study session? Or are we good? All right. It's 6:50. We'll come back at 7 o'clock. All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up on our agenda is the proposed updates to the Bothell Municipal Code, Title VI on Animals, Agenda Bill 25010. As you can tell, it is a study session. City Manager.
First study session of 2025. So tonight we are going to hear about a complete revision to Title VI on animals for consideration for council. Again, tonight there's no action being sought, but the intent tonight is to provide an overview of the draft code, which is in your packet, and to answer any questions you may have. With that, I'm going to turn things first over to our Chief of Police, Ken Suberlik, who will provide a little more context and do further introductions. Chief?
Well, thank you, City Manager Stannard. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council members. And for those that are watching online, my name is Ken Suberlik. I am the Police Chief for the City of Bothell. Tonight, as stated, we are going to be working on a study session on BMC Title VI, which is our animal control BMC. With me tonight is Police Support Services Manager Grace Myers, who will be providing this presentation. So with that, Grace, take it away.
Thank you. And thank you to the mayor and city council members. Again, this is a study session for BMC Title VI Animal Control. Upon review, we realized that this needed to be a complete repeal and replace. Our goals for making these updates are to better enforce animal neglect and align with our code, align our code with RCW, which would cover necessary food, water, and shelter. The updates would also provide us the opportunity to enforce compliance and allow for self-correction before reaching to the level of criminal charges by using a tiered system. And some history for you. Title VI has not been updated in 14 years. As you can see, animal control was initially started in the city of Bothell in 1972, last updated March 2011. We took a holistic look at the chapter and did make updates as needed to bring it to current. And I would like to bring your attention to the hobby kennel and hobby catteries. This would modernize the requirements for approvals for a hobby kennel or cattery, which includes removal of animal control in the police department, conducting electrical and plumbing inspections, and would also remove the neighbors approving and disapproving of the issuance of a hobby kennel or cattery license. Next would be the enforcement and penalties. This would introduce a tiered penalty system starting with a smaller fee going up in increments before reaching the criminal charges. And this, for rabies and public health, this was updated in order for animal control to require proof of vaccination and a quarantine process if a dog or a cat were to bite a human. It would also allow for us to prohibit feeding wildlife that would create an environment of unsanitary conditions. The point of this is not to prevent someone from being able to feed the birds in a bird feeder, but rather something that would attract rats or mice or something like that. And next is the potentially dangerous dogs and dangerous dogs. We are looking to modernize and put the potentially dangerous dog and dangerous dog designation process, and also modernize the ability to seize dangerous dogs. And lastly, we have the prohibited acts. We added reporting requirements should a domestic animal be struck by a motor vehicle, and prohibit reckless exposure of animals to hazardous objects or substances. And finally, these changes would also allow for the animal control officer to enforce animal neglect that occurs in the city of Bothell, which we currently cannot do. In the past year, we've been trying to do some information sessions and community outreach to see if the community would approve of us requesting to update and make some changes. In January of 2024, we did reach out and spoke to the Chiefs Advisory Committee. In February, we attended North Shore Senior Center, Holly Hills Clubhouse. And in April, we did the Bothell Vaccination Microchip Clinic. And in speaking to community members, we spoke to approximately 75 to 100 members. And it seems to be consensus that they were in support of us updating this chapter and making the requested changes that we were trying to go towards. Again, thank you for your time tonight regarding BMC Title VI. And again, there's no further action being requested, but we are seeking the council's feedback, and then we will return at a later date for action. Thank you.
Thanks so much for all of the work that went into rewriting a section of our code. And I think there was, like, how all did that happen? Like, was it sort of a line by line go through review? Like, who all was involved in that process? It looks like a group project.
I would take Eileen, so for legal, and then also Christy Boucher, the animal control officer. She did a lot of work. This has been years in the process. She had some really great ideas, and in diving in, Eileen observed that we were not up to current RCW, so we were trying to get it updated.
I think when they got to the part where the police were doing plumbing and electrical inspections, it was like, all right, we gotta start over.
Need more training.
Councilmember Aldrich, the one add I'd make is that our prosecution team has also reviewed it because of the penalties and enforcement aspect.
Great. Well, it sounds like it was interdepartmental, and a good team of people were working together on it, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, especially, being able to address animal neglect in our community, that's huge.
Yes.
I'm glad that that's included in there. And so I do have, this might be a nitpicky question. I just want to make sure I'm not misreading it, but it seemed like and like Officer Boucher is not going to be surprised when I ask this in the slightest, that the allowable number of pets in a home changed and could and possibly, if I read it, I might be reading it wrong, but it looks like it became more restrictive, not less restrictive.
We actually didn't modify that. You can have 3 dogs or 3 cats, or you could have up to 4 if it's a combination of dogs and cats. If you would like to have more than that, you can apply for the special hobby kennel license, which is no charge to apply for, and Officer Boucher can come and approve of that license. So it is allowed, and it's no charge to our community members.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, the kennel, the hobby kennel status doesn't mean you have to only have dogs or cats. You still could have a combination
Correct.
of the 2.
Yes.
Okay. And it would just be approved, but you don't need to look at plumbing and electrical anymore.
No, thank you.
Right. You're like, I don't know what I'm looking at here. Does it work?
Yes, that's where we were at.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I wanted to understand. So thank you. Appreciate it.
I have a few things, and so I may hog the floor here, and then just get it all out there. So I appreciate you guys so much. I know you know that, but I really do. I do have a question. No, we are not going to breed our dog. As soon as she reaches a certain age, we're burning that bridge, which I'm just waiting. It's within the next couple of months. But if someone wanted to do a litter, would they need a cattery or a hobby kennel or a cattery license if they were going to breed a dog?
To verify, no.
Correct.
If the animals are going to reside in the city for longer than 30 days and be over the limit, would be the
So an 8-week-old puppy, that's more than 30 days, so they would need to have a hobby kennel license,
Technically, but it costs $0.
which is great. I remember when, unless my memory's faulty, it used to be you could have 5 and a combination of 3 and 2, but.
If that was the case, it was prior to 2011. In
Yes.
2011 is
Oh,
when
well, I
I
don't
worked
know.
with,
Time flies for me, so
yeah, I
who
worked with
knows?
Captain Denise Nielsen at the time on that, when we
Yeah.
developed our own animal control, and I think that's when it was changed.
Okay. And I do remember during that same time, there was conversation about vicious dogs. And I think at the time it was pitties and maybe Rotties that were identified. And vicious dogs can be this big.
Yeah, it was
So-
very breed specific, and we had that removed back then.
Yeah. I will confess I had a bias for pitties, and the ones that I've met are just the most super sweetest animals ever. And the adage that it's not the dog, it's the owner. It's not the dog, it's the owner. I do have a question about rabies vaccines, because we stay on top of all that. But question, as I've talked to other animal owners, can the blood be titered to see if they have immunity for rabies, or do they have to have that vaccination as scheduled?
Christy? So sorry.
No, it's fine. I've been asked to come here, so you can hear me. So yes, you can titer a dog for rabies. It's like a $350 test. The more applicable answer to that is that your veterinarian can write you a letter on their letterhead to either approve not having a rabies vaccine proof if your animal has a reaction to it or a reason to not revaccinate.
Okay.
That has always been accepted.
Okay.
But yes, you can also do a titers.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect, because I know there are some people who have very strong feelings about that. Of
Yes.
Not over vaccinating if you don't need to.
We accept letters, but it's a doctor's opinion,
Okay.
not theirs.
Okay. And then, I had someone tell me about someone else that was a neighbor of theirs that throws bread out to feed crows. And they're absolutely sure that that's adding to the rat population. So I'm glad to see that addressed, and I can send them to you, and I don't even have to be part of that. So I appreciate that. And I think that's it, so thank you very much.
Just one quick question for me. Where's the line between a hobby and a commercial kennel and cattery?
She probably knows it by heart, but I took notes.
So in regard to the Bothell Municipal Code, there's a special hobby kennel or cattery, and then there's a hobby kennel or cattery. And so a special hobby kennel or cattery is when you're asking to have more than the legal limit of dogs and cats as pets. Often a loved one passes away and you inherit their animals, and you're asking to have, those 5 or 6 animals until natural causes allow you down to that limit. And it's not to replace them, it's those specific animals until that happens. Special hobby cattery or kennel would be you enjoy this specific breed of dog, and you do want to breed them and show them or hunt them or whatnot. So you may be adjusting the number of animals throughout the year, have a litter or 2. And so that is where most of the electrical and plumbing stuff came in, which I don't know what I'm doing there. It would still be a home inspection, and there would be an additional cost for that, but not for the pet ownership license.
That makes sense. And is there a renewal timeline for the licenses?
Yeah, it's 12 months to the date.
Okay.
So it's not a calendar year. So all of the pets that are pets and remain in the home have a City of Bothell pet license. Yep. And then the special hobby cattery or kennel does not have an additional fee. It's a Word document. I email you. You put their license numbers on. I come do a home visit, make sure that it's not unsanitary or an issue. Look at any past complaints, anything like that, and then it's just approved. And then we just do that once a year.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate all the work on the updates.
Yep.
It might be nice to say when a person reaches the magic age of 65, what happens?
Yes, we do have the senior discount. So if you're 65 or better, I like to call it.
Thank you for this. I think there's a lot of really important updates here, and Officer Boucher does great work, so however we can support that, I think is really important. I have two questions. One, for the commercial license, does the inspection happen every time that's renewed?
So in regard to commercial, I wouldn't be involved at all. So when you're looking at commercial, I think you mean like a pet store or
No,
grooming
sorry.
salon?
From what Ben said about, or Councilmember Mankey said about the hobby versus commercial. So when it's more of a breeder situation, like, would you do the inspection every time it's renewed to kind of make sure they're staying?
Yeah, so what I believe we're leaving in the code and asking is they do have to report to me the animals sold and numbers of litters as they happen throughout the year and or during the time of the inspection at renewal. So we look at that and proof of vaccinations and those things are included in the more business kind of category.
I appreciate that. And then if you are going to foster versus sell, puppies or kittens versus, have just more pets, is there wiggle room on that license, or is that, I guess, which direction would someone go?
Yeah, so our code doesn't really address like rover.com or something like that or fostering. What it does address is if you are owning or providing care for an animal for more than 30 days, they're considered a resident of the city as well, and that's where you would need that pet license. The fostering, there's that fine line of 32 days or what it may be. And for that, really, part I don't look at is zoning. So our code compliance department addresses the zoning, and depending on where you live in the city, you are zoned to be allowed to have so many animals on your property as well. And so there could be an incident where someone is doing rover or fostering, and the zoning says you cannot have more than the legal limit of the 4 on your property. So if they ask for the special hobby, they would be denied. It's a very small property that falls on, and it's not a common case, but they would be involved in that process.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't even think about rover. My aunt, who doesn't live in Bothell, takes in like kittens until they're ready to go, or puppies or whatever it is. But she's down to I was like, I know someone who has had kittens when I've been at police headquarters, which is always the best day.
They're over there right now.
Oh my God. I said that so quietly into the microphone. Yeah, so this is great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the presentation and all the work that went into this. Really great. I'm excited. I also have 2 questions. One is that some neighboring jurisdictions legislate dog barking as a nuisance. What was your thought process about not including that in our nuisances?
So that is a current code. So barking, yelping, whining, howling, or oral noise to an unreasonable degree is considered a nuisance in Bothell. And we haven't touched that. We left it as it is, which is officer discretion on what's unreasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I know that the city has an FAQ page about excessive barking, which really focuses on talk to your neighbor rather than call the police, which is great.
Yes, please.
We always like that, but sometimes it gets down to that. So thank you for being there when that needs to be addressed. The other question I had was also something that's probably not in this, not within the realm of this update, but other types of animals. Was that probably not very common in Bothell, but the other types of animals that you see other than dogs and cats, are there intersections with nuisances in these updates? I only now am thinking about, people have chickens and we can have llamas and all this other thing. I didn't read through really critically with the understanding of what happens with llama poop? What happens with chickens that are excessive noise and stuff? So I just wanted to run it by you and see, have these really been thought of through the lens of all animals or just dogs and cats mainly?
Yeah, so the types of animals is also under zoning, so Title 12, which I don't enforce. One of the things that we have asked and ran through legal was adopting that section of zoning under the animal section so that I'm able to enforce it. So currently under zoning, roosters are prohibited. But there's nothing under my section about enforcing that. You are allowed to have chickens in Bothell. It's so many per size. So again, it's the zoning and the property size, but we're asking to adopt that under animals so that I can address that as well. Same with sheep, cows, llamas, that's all under there. It's size of property is really what allows you to have them. But back to the barking, it's any oral noises from a domestic animal to an unreasonable degree. So we had a woman call me once and ask if she could move her emo to the city. And I said, sure, it says foul, so it doesn't say emus aren't allowed, but the booming that they make, I said, that does fall under oral noise to an unreasonable degree if it's disturbing the peace. So we've left the barking or the noise to what it is because it works and it's been working for us.
Cool, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Since it looks like we're winding down, what's the most interesting story you have to tell from your time working here that you can say in a council meeting?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
You
One positive, one negative.
Yeah.
Just like,
Oh my gosh.
We're gonna have 2 stories now.
the chief is
Yeah.
like,
I mean, the hardest ones have been removing the animals for cruelty. The harder ones, fortunately, have been the slam dunks where we follow RCW and there's pain and suffering and I can do something about it. The difficult ones are the 9 out of 10 where it's not right and you wouldn't do it and I wouldn't do it and it's icky. But our code doesn't allow me to enforce neglect. So I go to these welfare checks and these animals aren't living a happy life, but there's no obvious pain or suffering. And so I can do nothing about it. So I would say the most interesting have been, I removed 75 animals from a house in one night. I would call that interesting, but also very sad. I think my wins are when I can help the community and offer resources. So being able to go in and have these tools in my tool belt that we're asking for to gain compliance and help the animals and allow them to stay in the home, because the shelters don't want people's animals. They're full. We'd rather the animals stay in their homes and the people learn how to treat them better and do better. These requests that we're making allow me to still offer those resources, but have a recourse of when I do come back in a week, and if it is still this unsanitary or XYZ, I might need to write a ticket or have some leverage. And right now there's no leverage. It's just an ask, so.
I will say too, the events that we've had, that we've sponsored, that Christie's and the team have put together for vaccine and microchip, they've turned into rather large events over at the PD for the past few years. Mm-hmm. And, it's really nice, 'cause not everybody lives in Bothell that comes to these events, but they have an opportunity to come to Bothell and see the type of service that we provide here. So for me, I really like that, because then they can go back to their community and go, hey, how come? So.
thank you for this. In general, it sounds good. Do you anticipate any increase in your workload, which might mean another ask of the chief? It's like, hey, can you duplicate me?
Not in my workload. It will allow me to do my job better. I've been here almost 8 years. And so the same calls are going to come in next year as they are this year. I'll just be able to better help the community and protect those animals that are being harmed by people and protect people from the animals that are harming them with the dangerous dog stuff too. So I'll just be able to be more efficient and be better.
Can I ask a question that may be putting you on the spot? When there's an animal that's neglected, and I'm sure you run across situations where someone is living a very impoverished, hand to mouth. My memory is that you will keep food in your rig and at some point, when there's another food drive for that, can you let us know so we can put it up and talk about it a lot, so that we can, as a community, best stock you up with things for the city at large. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been doing a pet food drive for the community for the past 4, maybe 5 years. Through COVID was a little tough. It's always the Monday after Thanksgiving, and I do it through the end of the year. So I just finished up on the 31st. I will say we partner with the Everett Animal Shelter for all of our cases and for our community. They have an Amazon wish list on their website year round. So if anyone in the community ever wants to help our community directly in regard to the animal care, ordering something off their Amazon wish list and having it delivered directly to the shelter, you know what you're buying, you know how much you spent, you know where it's going, which is nice. And that's where I get some of the things for our community. So not just my pet food drives, year round, if we have an influx in people experiencing houselessness out in the community and I see animals with them, you're absolutely right. I keep 5-pound bags in my truck and I pull up and offer food to them. Chief was just out with me with a gentleman about a month ago that I was giving food to who was on the street. And so year round, if I don't have the pet food drive going on, I can grab whatever I need from the Everett Animal Shelter as our partner and keep my vehicle stocked. So.
Okay, so clarifying is the food that you use is essentially at the Everett Animal Shelter. It's not over at the police station.
Correct. I keep some in my office and some in my truck, and all of our patrol officers also know that it's in my office. So if I'm not working, they know where to grab it and they can always give it to a member as well.
Okay, but probably your preferred place to store it is
Support Everett.
Is Everett. Okay, thanks.
I'm really glad to hear that. And it makes me think of our volunteer opportunities page on the website. I think a lot of our volunteer opportunities are how to help people, but I don't necessarily know if we list any of our animal service partners. And so I'm wondering, would it be possible, and I don't know who's in charge of that page, but is it possible to get, Everett Animal Shelter as one of our partners and then link to that wish list so that community members who want to volunteer could?
We'll follow up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to go again. I had a moment when you were talking about how it won't add more work for you. It will let you do your job better. And I want to highlight that because I think it is very easy to do a job and say, that's not what I can do. Look, it's in the law. And to take the effort to build a code that lets you protect these animals and build a safer Bothell for all of the residents, human or not, is really, really, really awesome. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. This has been in the making for about 5 years, so we're ready.
That's awesome. This has all been super encouraging. Got a question for the chief. A tiered penalty system rather than going straight to something criminal also seems like it could work well for other uses, like say fireworks violations. Does this give us well played. Does this give us a template that we could use for things like that?
I think we'd have to get back with you on that.
Okay. That's fine.
I would like to say, if we're closing up here, I'd like to do a little shout out to our animal control officer and my manager and Eileen on this. This has been a lift, complete rewrite of our code. And they put a lot of time and effort and energy into this, and they care deeply about the service that we provide. So thank you.
And I will just say that care and professionalism is very apparent. So thank you. So, watch me here. We are going to close the public portion of the meeting and go to executive session. It's anticipated to last 45 minutes with no action expected. So it's 7:29, so that would make it 8:14. And we will adjourn from there. We can do that, correct? Perfect. Thank you.